Hello and welcome to Anchor Watch. I'm your host, Bobby Jones. It's a pleasure to be here with you. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's just say a few things have happened over the last week. And we'd like to get into not just what these incidents mean, but the overview of what's happening under this current Trump administration. And so, open and salvo, we're going to go over what's happened in Israel and Iran, the Middle East in general, and then for below the waterline, I'm going to try to help you connect dots. I'm going to try to help you connect the dots between what's happening overseas and what's happening here at home domestically. So, without further ado, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll do our best to try to address them. But let's start getting into it. So, we're going to start here with the scenes that just happened today. So, Sam, we can go with Alpha One there. So here is Donald Trump, the president of the United States. This is how he conducts diplomacy. He does it via social media posts. He does it via tweet or truth or whatever he calls it on his platform. And what you see is a man who thinks because he says something, people are automatically going to fall in line. He prematurely announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Now, what's interesting about this, if anybody's tracking this in detail, what happened initially was Iran responded saying they had not seen or heard of any ceasefire deal, right? And there's a reason for this because Iran was not talking to the United States. Iran was talking to the Qatari government. They were talking to Qatar. And the reason they were talking to Qatar is, let me put it in very simple terms. If someone came to your house and tried to destroy it, blow it up, would you be talking directly to them immediately after? I think the answer for most people would be no. And so they were talking to Qatar. Qatar was then talking to Israel and the United States. They were the intermediary between the two. And as soon as there was inkling of a possible ceasefire, Donald Trump had to broadcast it. Let me bring your minds back a few, not just a few weeks, a few days. President Trump has mentioned multiple times that he should be a Nobel Peace Prize winner. The reason he is on that is because his predecessor, Barack Obama, won the Nobel Prize. Again, we see the personality jump out, the personality of feeling inferior, the ultimate case of imposter syndrome. And now it is leaked and spilled into the diplomatic sphere, and that is an issue. So he prematurely announces a ceasefire, then adds timelines to everything 6 hours here, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. And it's almost like he did that so Israel and Iran can get their final shots off before the ceasefire took place. Well, in case you hadn't heard, that ceasefire lasted less than 3 hours. Both sides were shooting at each other again, and it was so embarrassing that the president put out that second tweet to Israel because Israel was the one that kind of started that back, and he scolded them like they were children. Do not drop the bombs, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's pretty obvious what you're seeing there. Now, what's amazing to me about this is I think the president is starting to realize that he may not have the control of the situation that he thought. I think he's starting to realize that Israel may be playing him, and the frustration, the embarrassment on the international stage, the lack of compliance by both sides, but particularly Israel, making him look smaller and even more reduced after weeks of being reduced by everything from Elon Musk to a parade to the G7. He feels pretty small. And so that led to this rant that happened on the White House lawn just a few hours ago. We can go to Alpha 2 there, Sam.
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too. Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land, I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
So, ladies and gentlemen, the leader of the free world. I don't know where to begin with this. Forget the cursing thing. You know, I'm a sailor by trade, so that doesn't bother me. It's the exasperation of his expression. He realizes that no one is taking him seriously. The office of the presidency is still not allowing people to take him seriously. That's amazing. That's amazing. He's being manipulated, he's being played, and he's running out of ways to try to be effective and be seen as effective, because that's the important piece. If this was all being settled behind closed doors and there was long lasting peace and Trump didn't get credit for it, or it wasn't publicized, he'd have a problem with that. He'd have a problem with that. He wants the credit. And right now he is being embarrassed every few hours due to this conflict. Now, what's interesting to me is he's heading to NATO, the NATO summit. So you guys see him with getting ready to get on Marine One and head overseas, and he's going to go to NATO. This is going to be interesting because since day one, he has tried to discredit that alliance from day one. But at the same time, he realizes the world is laughing at him. So I'm interested to see, what does he do? Does he wrap himself around being the head guy or the important guy in NATO and try to make it seem like he's in charge? Or does he continue to diss NATO, try to separate the United States from it and belittle everybody else? We don't know how this man's psyche is going to impact the most strong, the most long lasting alliance the world has ever seen in this mental state with these active wars. Okay. I, if someone were to tell me that we would have a president of the United States that would basically get played by Israel, laughed at by Iran, and completely disregarded by NATO allies, I would have said, what timeline is this? But this is where we are. And you guys are seeing it real time. Um, let's talk a little bit about what has happened in the Middle East. Can we bring up Alpha 4, the Middle East map? Um, one of the reasons why Iran made a point to tell the United States and Qatar that they were attacking, right, is because they wanted to send a message to their domestic audience that they were standing up to the United States, or the Great Satan, as it's been historically called by the regime there, without causing or raising or escalating the stakes in the region. This is a great map, a great unclassified map of where the U.S. military facilities are in the Middle East. Okay. All of that picture falls under the range of Iranian ballistic missiles. Okay. Very, very dangerous. The initial reports of multiple bases being attacked, etc., that's the fog of war, because they just heard sirens going off everywhere. What we need to understand is this calculus of 40,000 troops in that region had to factor into President Trump's calculations, right? Which is why he was so adamant on telling Iran not to do anything after America struck Iran with the B 2 bombers and the ordnance that were dropped. And we're still waiting. Well, this is not a waiting thing. The world is still waiting for the justification of that bomb drop, the nuclear weapon that was supposed to be days away. Well, Rolling Stone printed out an article saying there was no evidence, and that Trump decided to do this on a gut intuition, a feel. And this goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning of this with his mental state. That gut intuition was amplified by the fact that he felt reduced on the world stage, domestically. He needed something. So his gut was like, bomb something, do something that's powerful, regain the narrative. And now we're looking at the 40,000 troops, and that's not counting the deployed naval carrier strike groups that are in the region or on the way to the region, which will bring that number closer to 65 to 70,000 troops in the region. This is a dangerous game to play. You have a non-stable peace ceasefire, okay, along with more people coming into the region. This is where you have a probability of a miscalculation. Now, can you show A3 real quick, just so I understand, so people understand? This is me at one of those bases in the Middle East, no less than 3 years ago. Okay, 3.5 years ago. I was in charge of one of those bases. I'm not saying this because it sounds cool. I have lived this. In 2020, when Soleimani was assassinated on Donald Trump's orders, I had to grab my guys and make sure that they were accounted for in a safe space because of the fear of retaliation. That is currently what is happening right now to every base I just showed you on that map. Okay? So there are real ramifications and repercussions to what is happening here. Okay. That area, although small, is highly concentrated with many American service members. Okay. That area is the linchpin to the global economy, the Straits of Hormuz, which are right there. 20% of the oil goes through. And can anybody tell me what the current Trump administration policy on this area is? What is it towards Iran? At first, it was just to stop them from having a nuclear weapon. Then he said it was regime change. And then this morning, he said it's not regime change. So, what the hell are we doing there? Again, I've said in weeks before, there's no national security strategy. This is why you need to have one. I'm laying out the argument of what is happening. There is no policy. And his devoted followers, both in Congress and the United States, all these people are just like whatever he says goes without anybody really thinking. But you're starting to see the split because of it. Let's see. This is dangerous. I feel so unsafe, especially when we have a cabinet of fools. So, Laura, let's talk about that for a second. The cabinet that was hand selected by Donald Trump based on their loyalty, not their aptitude. Okay. This is why it's dangerous. You saw behind him on Saturday evening, you saw J.D. Vance, the vice president. You saw Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State / National Security Advisor / National Archivist / head of USAID. And then you saw Pete, or as I like to call him, Sect Death Bro, the guy who is not in the room when these major decisions involving his forces are being made. And then he is sent out there to clean up and look competent right next to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs because they don't trust his judgment for a damn thing. Multiple reports have said he has not been in the room. So if he is not in the room, then what the hell is he doing there? Right? You saw his congressional testimony here recently. He had nothing factual to say, but he talked about the only book that people should follow is the Bible. He said this in a Senate confirmation, or not Senate confirmation, a Senate grilling because he got grilled and couldn't tell you what our policy was towards Iran at the same time. He jumps to culture war issues when he is questioned on his actual competency to do the job. And you will see that reoccurring throughout all the different cabinet positions, whether we're talking about Department of Homeland Security, where we're talking about, even agriculture, where they're trying to talk about immigration and how it's killing that sphere of American society with the deportations. There is a lack of competency at the top of our government. And that is highlighted by the 22-year-old who is in charge of fighting and combating domestic terrorism within the United States. He has no job experience whatsoever. He was an intern that worked on the Trump campaign and really loves Trump. And so now, with Iran talking about sleeper cells being activated all over the world, we have a 22-year-old who was an intern during the Trump administration, during the Trump campaign, and whose credited work history is bagging groceries. That's the guy that's supposed to stop terrorism in the United States. I want people to really sink in on that. Okay. So, all of these things that have happened here in the last week, I'm going to start connecting these. Let's go to below the waterline. They are connected to the same exact things that we have seen going on domestically in the United States. The deployment of United States active duty Marines, the involuntary deployment of the National Guard to California, the increased ICE raids in various neighborhoods, overwhelmingly those of blue states. You're seeing a military a military, how do I put this delicately without trying to trip everybody's mind? You're seeing a police state that is being backed by the military. Involuntarily backed, yes, but still being backed by the military. You're witnessing the beginnings of American Gestapo. And I say that because you have people who are being taken off the streets without warrants being presented, without identification being shown, without faces being shown. And you look in the background in LA because they're still deployed. You see active duty Marines there. Has anybody heard or seen any riots going on there in Los Angeles in the last few days? And even the ones that happened were so limited in scope, but yet they're still there. When and I'm waiting for a member of Congress to ask, okay, let's take a look at the statistics of the deportations. Where are most of them occurring? And they're going to be overwhelmingly blue cities. The flip side of that is the MAGA faithful will say, well, those are sanctuary cities. Well, that's not even the point. Statistically speaking, most of these migrants that you're trying to deport are in red states because of the agricultural base in most of them. So they're being selective of who they're targeting. And now the Supreme Court just ruled that you can send these people who are being deported to not third world countries, but third option countries, meaning you're not sending them back to where they came from, you're just sending them someplace else, period, as long as it's not the United States. That was a 6-3 ruling. Now, you want to talk about lack of due process, you want to talk about lack or violation of human rights, that's it. You just take someone off the street and drop them off in a place they've never been before in their life without due process. That's what's happening. Why is that connected to what we just talked about? Because Trump sees the military and any other organization that has the ability to have oppressive force as his right hand. He believes that that is not the last resort, but the first and only resort. He believes that that type of power will let his words have more resonance. That's what he honestly thinks, which is completely ass backwards. Completely. What should be happening is his words move people to act accordingly, or he's able to counter the protests with his words because there's so much respect and so much thought behind them. Instead, he doesn't bother to do that. He is a toddler throwing temper tantrums with the full weight of the United States military and various other organizations at his disposal. It's not working in either place, though. It's not working domestically. You've seen the rallies, you've seen the protests, no kings, you've seen the poll numbers. And it sure as hell is not working internationally because right now, right now, can you name one area of the world where if Donald Trump was to speak on it or go visit or to just address them, that they would take his word? And mind you, we are not even fully 6 months into this administration. NATO, all these organizations, these treaties, these trade agreements that took decades to establish have been unraveled in less than 6 months. And it's all because we elected, and I say we elected, the most insecure, imposter syndrome suffering person in the United States of America. We really did. And now the entire world is suffering from it. So the connection between LA to ME, the Middle East, is pretty profound. It's the desire to be an authoritarian and only no one's listening. Let's see, he wants a shortcut. He has no patience or understanding for real statecraft. Patrick, I would agree with that, but here's the thing: when you say understanding, he has no desire to learn statecraft. Why should he? He comes from a world, he comes from a background where he believes might makes right. I mean, ask the people in New York and New Jersey how many people didn't get paid working for Donald Trump. And he realized that those people did not have the legal recourse nor the funding to fight him. That's where he learned all of this. There's no interest to learn a process when you honestly don't think the process applies to you. And so when you see an office like the presidency, when you see someone ascend to a CEO position or a commanding officer position, it doesn't change your personality, it amplifies it. And we're watching the amplification of everything that is wrong with American culture in Donald John Trump being in the White House. And again, people, we put him there for a second time, a convicted felon. What do you expect? What do you really expect? Okay, with that, let's open it up to some questions here on the smoke deck. Attitude of the military towards this. Well, I can tell you from people I've talked to here in the last week, they're like, "What are we doing?" They don't understand the average boot on the ground, the sailor on the deck plate, does not understand what we're trying to accomplish. And there's a reason for that. The president of the United States has not told the people of America what we're trying to accomplish. Do y'all remember? I'm old enough to remember when a major military operation or a major shift in policy was about to take place. The president addressed the nation in a prime time speech from the Oval Office. You know, sitting there at the Resolute desk with pictures of his family behind, very monotone, very measured. Every president has that moment where they've done that, especially when it came to taking preemptive military action. Well, we're still waiting. What Trump did Saturday was not anything laying out a case. What it was patting himself on the back and wanting to recreate Barack Obama's "I just killed Osama bin Laden" experience. That's all that was. So the military doesn't know what our goals or objectives are, just like the American people don't. The military is just following the orders that they're being told in the meantime. But let me tell you something. Anytime the military does not know what they're doing or why they're doing it, rather, they become frustrated. And so there's a lot of frustration. You have people who are going on deployment that are like, "What are we doing? Why are we here?" You have people, Marines in LA, like, "Why are we here?" There have been multiple reports of them talking to the media saying this is stupid. So yeah, we're not seeing the military does not see this as a win across the board like Trump is trying to portray it. All right, what else do we have? Probably any comment on some defense money? Obviously, Trump will take credit for that. Well, yeah, I mean, he's going to take credit for that, and the upping of money, percentages of their budgets increasing, that started before Trump even came into office. But we're only focusing on the time that Trump came into office saying that. There had been those moves prior to. And let me be very clear on this. Even when they weren't doing that, and that was 6-7 years ago, etc., they paid in blood. You have many of those nations that lost people because they went to war with us. We acted Article 5, collective self-defense, and it's only happened once, and that was America after 9/11. So all of those countries have donated their precious resources of their lives, their people, to defend the United States. To me, there's no monetary value on that. Now, they were increasing their budgets before Trump came into office, and they're increasing it now. It's not because they're listening to Trump. It's because they're realizing they cannot rely on the United States to remain part of the alliance. And that's the first time they've ever had to do that. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this alliance was created to stop things like World War One and World War Two, and now for the first time, the biggest member of that charter membership may be backing out." And so what that does is everybody increases their budget, but that's the same exact thing that happened before World War One, where each individual European nation spent a lot of money and formed different little alliances, and the next thing you know, the war was at war. So we're repeating the same mistakes that we made over 100 years ago because Trump does not want to be the stabilizing factor for the most important alliance in the world. What else do we have? Let's see. I never thought I would hear POTUS basically threaten Democrats. So let's talk about this. You're seeing the increase in rhetoric because the increase in rhetoric is being allowed by, well, I blame Democrats and Republicans for this. What I mean by that, the Democrats are just sitting there and not forcefully pushing back. They're not trying to recall or impeach anybody. They're not trying to censor anybody. There are things they can do that they're not doing. They're just like, oh, they should stop doing that. No, you need to take some type of action for the record legally to stop that. You had a U.S. Senator from California and Senator Padilla freaking wrestled to the ground for asking a question in a public hearing. Okay. Noam, who, I have so many thoughts about her and her cosplaying a legal law enforcement officer. She is trying desperately to be the it person in that cabinet. She's trying so hard. And so she's ramping up the rhetoric. But again, they all fall in line and follow their dear leader. He starts this rhetoric. He has made these threats before, and therefore they believe it's fair. We're if it wasn't, you would think that the shooting of state elected officials in Minnesota would tamper this down. I remember when Steve Scalise, one of the major players on the GOP side in the House, was shot. Everything ramped down. You're not seeing that now because the leadership, the president, is not ramping it down. So they do what they're led to do. What else do we have? What is it going to take to get rid of this administration? Voting, going to the polls, putting people in place at the midterms. Well, actually, it starts this year with governor's races and special elections in 2025, because these things that Trump is doing is being executed at the local level too. But you better believe by 2026, you have to put people in place that will say unequivocally, I will not hesitate to impeach the president of the United States if I believe he's violating the Constitution. See, I've seen Democrats talk around it. I've seen Democrats say they should say something and do something. I've seen even Republicans question the constitutionality of what's happened here recently, right? But I have yet to see people stand on business. There's a reason Article 1 talks about Congress and not the president, because that is where the true power of this whole, Democratic Republic experiment is supposed to be. They put it first for a reason. And they have 18 responsibilities according to the United States Constitution that are delineated. 18. And these guys are failing all over the place. All over the place. So you got to put people in who are really going to do something. Do something. Not talk about it, not be on the Sunday talk shows, getting their name out there and working on their brand. All right, we got time for one more. What do we have? Let's see. Are you concerned about Trump? So, yes and no. Looking at that question about the speech at Fort Bragg, yes and no. Yes, because, well, let me start with no. No, because the American military has people from all political spectrums. Always has, always will. Always will. That's just the nature of the beast. However, what unites us is we took an oath, number one. But number two, we follow the mission because we know that's our job, right? And those political differences have not only never been highlighted before, they have been suppressed. We suppress them. You go out of your way not to talk politics, and especially in a formal setting like that. Now, this is why it scares me. It scares me because the administration handpicked people, selected people to be behind him, right? And what it's doing is it's going to start creating divisions within the ranks, which is what they want. And then they'll promote the people, that they want, that they believe are politically aligned. No offense to the current, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but the reason he's sitting there is because he kissed the proper butt of Donald Trump when he was a 2-star. Okay. That's why. That's why. They dusted him off and brought him out of retirement and put him in charge. Not qualified. He's a DEI hire. He is. Now, granted, I will say this: he's competent. But by the time you get to that level in military, all of those guys are competent. You get to a certain level of flag stars, you're competent, right? But what Trump is doing could have a long lasting effect on our military if we're not careful. So that's the part that scares me. But I have heard from enough people where I know that people realize what he's doing is wrong. So that gives me hope. And I think that's about all the time we have for today. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I can't tell you how important it is for you guys to not be overwhelmed by the news, but don't take your eye off of either and look at different sources. I'll be back tonight for the strategy session with Rick Wilson and others. So we'd love to see you there, and thanks for tuning in.